Welcome to the Game Professors podcast, where the students have taken over and we profess our love and hate for all things video games. It is the first episode that we are beginning, so we would like to just go over a little bit of background on each of us. I am Plague, and my lovely co-host is Heru, although I don't think he'd refer to himself as lovely.
True. Definitely not. I would not consider myself lovely.
It's okay. I'm sure somebody would. You want to give some background on yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm primarily a MMO gamer. I've done RPG. I've rated in top 500 guilds so far. I primarily play World of Warcraft. I main Hunter. Like to play RPGs on the side and just little indie games, and occasionally play FPSs with Plague.
Yeah, we do have some good times, that's for sure. I'm mainly a FPS person, although I do love a good RPG or anything really with a fantastic narrative storyline, and always enjoy a good action-adventure game as well. I ended up pretty high in the Counter-Strike scene before I got burnt out and angry and decided it was time to maybe change it up a little bit, and that's a story we can always get in at a different time. So we do have quite a bit of variety between the two of us. And I know both of us spent some time in some actual video game courses in college, so we figured we'd have ourselves a fun discussion and give it maybe a little bit of that type of theme. So on that note, we're going to begin with the first section called the Lecture Lowdown, where we kind of touch on some things that have been announced throughout the week or some new stuff that's come up before we kind of get into the next session. So we're going to begin with Escape from Tarkov launching on Steam, which I'm sure a lot of people are happy about. However, what they're not going to be happy about is that you still have to pay for it even if you already own it, which is definitely kind of a bummer.
It really is a bummer. It's very sad that Battlestate Games has given us no options to just automatically port it over. It's very possible for them to do. All they would have to do is give us Steam keys. But no.
Well, not only that, you still have to sign into your account. So even if you purchase it on Steam, you're still required to sign into the account. So any combination of keys and that same sign-in, there's no reason why it should be paid for. But as we know with the history of the developer, kind of par for the course, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
And I know you have some Warcraft news you might want to get into.
Oh, absolutely. As of today, we had a deep dive on World of Warcraft's new expansion called Midnight. One of the big key features of Midnight is they're actually introducing player housing, only 20-something years later after we've requested it initially. In this upcoming expansion, there's a lot of little things that we don't really need to get into, but the big takeaways for people who aren't WoW players is that they're introducing an axolotl shapeshift form for druids for the new playable race, which I've seen it. It looks interesting. And I'm very surprised that they chose axolotls. I don't really understand why axolotls are so popular in pop culture right now, but I do love them, so I understand it kind of.
I mean, they're just adorable little sea pets, is what I'm going to classify it as. It's the type of thing that people always love the idea of owning, but no one's actually going to go through the effort of doing.
Yeah, that's fair. I've thought about it for so long to actually buy an axolotl, but and this is going to get way deeper than it needs to, but their tank requirements are absolutely ridiculous. You have to keep their tank at 60 degrees. It's stupid. That's not happening in any state in the United States.
No, that does seem like a little extra effort. It's the kind of thing that people love and want, and then as soon as you get into the nitty gritty, you're like, nah.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
This is also combined with a capybara god too, which is this just the adorable update for WoW that's happening?
You would think so, but no. So the capybara is actually it's going to be what is called a Loa, which is effectively a god in that world. So that capybara is supposed to be the Loa of children, or god of children, to be easier. which is actually going to be really interesting. I think it's kind of fitting for a capybara.
Well, I mean, I could see it. But once that's out, I'm sure you'll have to give us some rundown on all the things that were affected and how it actually played out.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see the story regarding that, Loa. On the other hand, the thing that I'm actually a little more excited for when it comes to Midnight is the fact that they're completely nuking combat add-ons. And for those who may not be aware, an add-on is effectively something you add in addition to the game that's not necessarily... how to put it? It's not designed by the developer, but the developer of the game allows you to add it. And over the course of like the past 20 years, combat add-ons have gotten extremely complex and made it to where you absolutely require them to play at any reasonable level, which is kind of sad. So they're finally getting rid of all that, which I'm really excited for.
It's definitely going to be a shakeup and keeps things lively and interesting.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that as it actually comes out and you can give us a better report on it. But that being said, as of this recording, tomorrow, the PS5 exclusive Ghost of Yōtei will launch, and that is following the very successful previous game, which I'm sure a lot of people have played, Ghost of Tsushima, which ended up reaching about 9 million copies sold. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be picking that one up as it's set 300 years later in northern Japan, with a planned multiplayer expansion arriving in 2026, because as we know, multiplayer expansions for single-player games always work out. But currently, early reviews for the game are definitely in the high 80s, so it looks like at least the sequel from the single-player standpoint will definitely hold up. That being said, we've also got some double news on the Kojima front. The man is launching a credit card.
A credit card is such a weird decision. I understand it, mostly because I understand Japanese culture and how weird Japanese culture is regarding money. But fans are also immediately nicknaming this product Debt Stranding, which is an amazing call to Death Stranding, one of my absolute all-time favorite games.
I mean, I own it, and I still haven't played it. It's one of those that, God, it's on the top of the list of my Steam library as soon as I'm looking for something to play, for sure.
I mean, it only took me about 40 hours to do kind of the whole main story without trying to rush through it. I honestly think you would really enjoy it, though. But I will say, a lot of people complained about it being a walking simulator, and it kind of is. I mean, you're a delivery guy.
Well, as soon as I play it, we'll have a full breakdown. And you can give me all the tips and tricks. But that being said, I do see why someone like Kojima, considering the type of things that he's putting in Metal Gear Solid and Death Stranding, why with the current crackdown from credit card issuers, he might want his own that is unaffected. So we'll see how that goes. That should be fun. Maybe it'll have some really cool artwork and we'll all be on board. On top of that, though, let's continuing on the Kojima news. He did actually, Kojima Productions, his video game company, did actually announce and shared an early glimpse of, I'm going to go ahead and say Cyanit? Cyanit? Any suggestions on how to pronounce that?
Fizzint?
Fizzint? I mean, I guess. Yeah, totally. That's probably the better way to pronounce that. Fizzint. Anyways, it'll be an action espionage title, surprise, surprise, from Kojima, featuring a cast of a few celebrities, and it's going to be eyed for a 2030 release, potentially on a PlayStation 6, maybe. So we'll look forward to seeing more about that. Also announced on the PlayStation State of Games was Insomniac revealing a trailer for Marvel's Wolverine. It's supposed to be something that's kind of a little bit darker and more brutal than the Spider-Man series, but definitely kind of filling that exclusive superhero gap. Apparently going to be set in Japan, which always a good setting for any kind of video game.
True.
But it should be fun, and I look forward to seeing more about that in the future. Also set in Japan will be Forza Horizon 6, which is normally an Xbox exclusive, but they've already said that after a short exclusive window, that will come to PlayStation 5. And Microsoft also announced that Flight Simulator 2024 will also be coming to PlayStation 5 with PSVR support, continuing the pattern of Microsoft putting stuff out on multi-platform.
Yeah, given the fact that Microsoft recently purchased Blizzard Entertainment, I'm also expecting WoW to come to any platform soon. Maybe to your Samsung Smart TV soon. Who knows?
That's fair. We'll talk more about Xbox, I think, next week, because there's a few other things that have come out. But it's definitely interesting to see them shift to this strategy, and we'll get more into that at another time period. But kind of one of the bigger PSA stories that I wanted to hit in this first section here for the lecture lowdown. Unfortunately, some bad news, as a cancer patient, or at least somebody raising funds for a cancer patient, ended up personally losing $32,000, with other similar scams kind of totaling $150,000, as they were playing a game called Block Blasters live, and it's a free game from Steam, so a place that you would consider kind of a safe spot to pick up a game. But apparently it's part of a recent trend of drainware games that are made free on Steam, where people download them and it's actually malware.
That's so concerning. Not to get too deep into like legal stuff, but I really wonder who's actually at fault in that scenario. Is Steam expected to maintain their games and make sure that they're safe?
I mean, I feel like there would be at least a base kind of expectation that they would do the minimum to make sure these are fine. So the type of exploitation that they're using is kind of something that's popped up recently since 2023, called some Steel C. So if anyone's wanting to kind of get into the nitty gritty, please feel free to check that out. And unfortunately, once it's into the system, they can kind of trigger it. So I don't know if it's something that Steam is missing beforehand because it's not showing up, and they're adding it with an update after the game's already been on Steam, which then you have to talk about, should Steam be checking every update like they do on consoles?
Honestly, hard to say, but yeah, I think they probably should.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but how much are we slowing down the program? I definitely think that thankfully they reacted quickly as soon as this was brought to their attention, especially because it was done on a live stream. And thankfully, even though this is a sad story, it did end up ending in a good spot, as a few community investigators referred to as Zach XBT in a group called VXUG, who ended up reimbursing that particular streamer for the money so that they can continue on with their charity work, which is nice. But keep an eye out there, people. Stay safe. Make sure the free-to-play game you're downloading isn't filled with malware. So on that note, we'll move over to what we'd like to call the lab work, where we analyze some recent releases. And this week, the thing that we're going to be talking about is Silent Hill F, which launched, which, at least for a Silent Hill game, was somewhat successful, as it sold over 1 million copies, and it's outpacing the recently as of last year, Silent Hill 2 remake, and it's gotten a pretty decent critical reception. I just don't know about trusting Konami since how they exited the gaming scene initially.
Yeah, that was a sad story.
It was a sad story. We can always get back into that. But the game set in 1960s Japan, which obviously with the recent news that we just talked about, is apparently the new hotness. Outside of that, mainly loved for the strong narrative theme, the visuals, the atmosphere, a little bit of some clunky combat system, and kind of focusing a little bit more on the action over the horror. which definitely the Resident Evil series can attest to may not be the best. So we'll see how that goes further on. And I think with the success of this game, they have already announced that they will be going back and doing a remake of the original Silent Hill game. So we'll see how that goes. But that's kind of what's been out this week. So if you're looking for a decent horror game, that's something that you can go pick up now. Moving on to... Whoops, sorry.
Hold on. Now I have to make some comments here.
Go for it.
So I haven't played any Silent Hills. I don't like horror in general, but I have played other games similar. And look, a great narrative and good visuals and sound, those are important. But if the game feels like crap to play, it's not going to be a fun time. Clunky combat systems have been the downfall of many, many games.
I mean, you're not wrong, but for a game like that, especially when you look at, even at the time, not necessarily the best control schemes, the original Silent Hill games, the atmosphere, especially in a horror game, you can forgive a little bit of clunky combat, but as long as you're kind of buying into what's happening, that can still be popular for sure.
That's true. I don't disagree. I mean, there are plenty of games out there that have zero combat. So, we are.
But it is Konami, so they definitely don't get the benefit of the doubt.
No, they do not.
So, well, I mean, for the health of the video game industry, let's hope they continue to do a good job and don't sit on their laurels, let's say. But actually moving on to business and econ, where we kind of get into a little bit of the video game industry as a whole and some actual raw numbers. We are going to kind of do a little callback to something maybe a few weeks ago, considering this is the first episode, where, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 surpassed 4.4 million copies sold, which for a game that came out of nowhere from a small studio is fantastic.
A French studio, no less, if my memory serves correctly.
I mean, they're killing it in the media game lately. Arcane is some of my favorite stuff. So if they're going to make good video games and good media, good luck to everybody else.
Did you ever get a chance to actually play Clair Obscur?
No, not yet. I do own it. It's one of those things that because it's turn-based, I actually do want to play it on the treadmill. So as I'm kind of getting back into the habit of at least getting some cardio in, it's kind of going to be the first game that I load up to play on it.
That's fair. I did put some time into it. I didn't finish it. There are a couple things that I can say about it. Number one, it is amazing what they've done to innovate on the turn-based RPG genre. The action combat inside of the turns is amazing. It really is. Unfortunately, for me, turn-based games put me to sleep. So I didn't get through very much of it, but what I did play was amazing. And it is absolutely a Game of the Year contender, hands down.
I mean, I'm sure we'll be talking about it when we get back around to those Game of the Year type of stuff. But there's a reason everybody is saying that. And again, seems like the perfect game for me to play on the treadmill. No necessarily precision stuff, except for, precision dodge mechanics. So Maybe it's something that you can play in the right scenario and get through.
True.
Alrighty. And on top of selling at least 4 million copies, Hollow Knight Silksong easily hits 4 million on Steam in its first week, which is insane to me when you're talking about a game from a small studio hitting it that quickly.
Yeah, Hollow Knight, the first Hollow Knight was amazing. I mean, 2D platformers for quite a long time have been extremely good sellers. But Hollow Knight took it a step further and actually introduced some of that Souls-like gameplay, where you actually are upgrading stuff and things like that. And if you die, it's actually punishing. Now, I'm not a fan of that stuff, but I can say that the combat in Hollow Knight in general was really good. Now, on the other hand, the way that they released Silksong pissed off a lot of people.
I mean, pissed off a lot of non-consumer people.
Not necessarily. Yes, it did piss off a lot of other indie devs, and in my opinion, they can just get over it. But they didn't introduce any pre-orders in any way, shape, or form. And because of that, they crashed Steam.
I mean, if any game is going to crash Steam, though, I think we can all appreciate that it was an indie game that came out of nowhere.
Oh, I agree. Don't get me wrong. But for all of the couple 100 million people who didn't buy Silksong and were just trying to do something else on Steam, I'm sure it pissed them off a little bit.
Or maybe it led to more sales as they looked up what the hell was going on and found out it was an indie game that everybody was buying, and they jumped on board too.
That is actually possible.
I mean, it is estimated that its total as of a week ago when we first pulled up this article, it was over 6 million in total.
Fair enough. I mean, props to those devs. They have released banger after banger. That's just the facts.
At consumer-friendly prices, which is
True.
amazing and something that we all need to celebrate in the industry at the moment.
Big agree.
So, anyone in the industry that's upset about that, well, you can deal with that on your own. Price your games at whatever you want, and maybe it'll be at a price that people appreciate it, and maybe it won't be. But Silksong nailed it, so I don't think there's really much more we need to say about it, other than we're definitely going to talk about it in the Game of Year stuff.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely come back to
it. All right. Well, that being said, speaking of developers that maybe don't price their games appropriately, it turns out that Electronic Arts is now being taken private. So maybe being off of the stock market will allow them to be a little bit more consumer friendly, or at least long-term focused instead of short-term focused, as it is a part of the largest ever buyout in a deal valued at $55 billion. And it's funded by private equity firms, including Silver Lake, a Saudi Arabian public investment fund, which I'm sure there is a prince a part of, and Affinity Partners, which is a firm led by Jared Kushner, A.K.A. the current president's son-in-law.
Interesting. I know nothing about any of those companies.
I don't think anyone did before this.
That's honestly fair. However, I agree with you. There's a chance that, I mean, it's pure devil's advocate, right? No one's going to trust EA until they turn around and actually do something worth trusting. But there's a chance. Them going private actually makes it possible for them to stop worrying about stockholders. And then now they just get to worry about maybe making good games.
I agree with that, and that is the hope, and I'm definitely on board with that. My only concern is that the majority of it was a leveraged buyout, which means that it's a $20 billion kind of debt financing buyout from JP Morgan Chase and other such banks, and those are considered junk bonds. So they're high interest rate, and they are the responsibility to pay them off is by EA. So hopefully the company can still focus on long-term success. I mean, they do have quite a few games that look like they're going to be hits, including Battlefield 6, that are going to come out soon. So hopefully they can maybe start paying back some of that debt.
I feel like there's going to be a layoff conversation in our future.
There definitely could be. We'll see. I mean, either way, as much as I've hated on EA over the years, I think that there's too few large game companies in the space. So I definitely don't want to see them exit at the moment. So hopefully they can kind of find their groove and do things that are less predatory than they have been previously. We'll see as that kind of moves along. That being said, I know we have some more WoW news.
Yeah, kind of. it's like WoW news that didn't actually happen. It's
Okay.
Schrodinger's WoW news. So when you put something on the internet, as we all know, it stays there.
Uh-huh.
Even if you take it down, it's still there. So PC Gamer and many subsequent news places after this posted something regarding Midnight Collector's Edition. So the new expansion and the Collector's Edition, and it has a lot of different little like things, physical items for once, right? I'm not going to say what they are. You can find them on Internet Archive or something if you want. But so far, I don't really want Blizzard to come knocking at my door and tell me to take down this episode. So I'm just not going to mention the things that are in there. There are some things that we kind of expect. Anything from the Epic Edition is obviously going to be there, so a lot of the digital items from those. But those physical items, looking at them, they look cool. And I want them. And
sure
the price was
quite a
also
few people
mentioned.
Want them.
But I'm not going to mention the price either. I would highly recommend looking it up, but it's hard to find. I'm sure it'll be posted officially at some point. However, this does kind of lead into something that I wanted to kind of talk about, which is, when do you reveal something?
I mean, that's a good question. I do kind of like the recent tradition. We just talked about Hollow Knight, where it's just grab and go. Here's the news. It's soon, or it's next week, or it's today. I feel like, at least as a consumer, I do appreciate less lead up, because I think when you give people too much time to build hype, it can be a negative thing. I mean, just look at what happened to Cyberpunk, but there was a whole lot more around that, and it's a whole different discussion on its own. But I know personally, I prefer the, rip it and grip it kind of thing, where here's the news, it's coming, be ready.
That's fair. For something like WoW, where a lot of people will take 1 to a month off sometimes for the releases of World of Warcraft expansions, or even just major patches, I think them telling us that as early as possible would be ideal. But the problem is if they do that, they also now have to hold themselves to that date.
That's true.
Now,
and being on that type of time frame too can force unintended errors, as you have to hit it and you don't want to be delayed.
Very true. Now, the thing that I find kind of interesting is that this accidental leak, and maybe it really wasn't, who knows, but this accidental leak confirms that there's a collector's edition. It was way too detailed to not be a confirmation, plain and simple. So the problem that I have with this is that this collector's edition exists. We know it exists now, but it hasn't been released yet. But I can pre-order the Epic Edition already. I haven't yet. I usually don't until way later. But the fact of the matter is, what happens if you do pre-order the Epic Edition? Do I get to just upgrade for the difference to the collector's edition? Because I doubt it.
I would imagine it has to be a cancel one and pick up the other.
And that's my concern.
Oh, which is unfortunate. Well, only time will tell, though, right?
True. And speaking of idiotic things that companies do that none of us really like, Nintendo.
Well, hold on. You were just worried about Blizzard coming after you. And now you're going to talk about Nintendo?
Honestly, that's fair. But, Nintendo really only goes after the people who actually create good content about them or of their games. They haven't really gone after anyone who shames them or publicly criticizes them.
I mean,
They only go after the people who actually want to promote their games.
yeah, it's kind of a weird inverse reality that they exist in.
Oh, I know. Now, the dumb thing that Nintendo did recently was that they submitted a patent that, honestly, it's very common in a lot of games. It is overly broad, and I find it ridiculous. They actually submitted 2 patents, but the one that I'm referring to right now is the ability to summon a monster. Not even just a monster, another game character is the way that it's phrased in the patent. And can you tell me a few games that summon a character?
I mean, they definitely exist. There's quite a few out there, but we literally just stopped talking about WoW. And doesn't WoW allow you to summon a mount?
Yes. Summon a mount, summon a pet, summon a demon, summon a little tiny battle pet, a companion, all kinds of things. Summon your friends, add a summoning stone. All kinds of things are possible to be summoned in WoW. And this kind of overreach is honestly more of a failure on our US patenting system than it is Nintendo. They're just taking advantage of it. Which,
yeah, because it's just kind of weird too. Because we're gonna get into Borderlands in a little bit, but even the Borderlands series has allowed you to summon pets and other familiars. I mean, you've had Elder Scrolls, you've had Final Fantasy. I mean, they exist all over the place. So this is just weird that they were able to get this patent.
I agree. And maybe there's something in this patent that I'm not seeing. Maybe there's something very specific about it that is the reason that they got this patent. I'm not 100% sure. This is 45 pages long, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't care that much.
I mean, wait, you're not litigating the case?
No, I am not. But it just seems weird to me that they would be allowed to do this. The things that I would expect Nintendo to patent is the specific action of a Pokemon coming out of a Pokeball. That's a novel invention. The simple summoning of a creature, not novel. That's been around since the dawn of time, since we started writing books and TV series and all kinds of stuff.
I mean, pick any game where you can be a necromancer, right?
Yeah, literally. Diablo.
Yep.
Yeah, tons of them. No, Final Fantasy, the summoner in Final Fantasy 14 summons a carbuncle.
I guess the question is, what is considered a character specifically? Like, is this like a well-known copyrighted thing like a specific Pokemon as opposed to a skeleton? I guess that's the kind of things that if they were going to litigate that they would have to specify, right? So, and can it be considered a character when technically hundreds, if not thousands of them exist and they're not a unique being, right? Because the whole point about Pokemon is that there isn't one. It's a species. Each one is a species, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're effectively beasts, right?
Yeah. So I there's a lot here that, like you said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I mean, there's recourse for companies too that need to fight this, because there's so many examples that we just named where they can show, hey, this isn't true. This isn't unique to Nintendo. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure you could patent something like this back to 1999. But again, I'm not a lawyer. So maybe we'll have to have an episode where we find a lawyer friend and get them on to just have a whole episode about Nintendo lawsuits.
That's fair. Now, I'm sitting here reading the abstract, which is kind of the extent of how far I went for any of these outside of the actual programming process that I kind of dug into because I'm a nerd. It seems to maybe be something regarding the automatic control of the sub character where they like automatically try and find an enemy. But WoW used to have this because you used to be able, you can't do it anymore, but you can in Classic still. You used to be able to put your pets on aggressive as a hunter. I am a hunter main. And when you did that, if something got into their aggro radius, they just ran at it. So isn't that technically the automatic control of a character? A sub-character, no less, because it is a summon?
I mean, I would think so. And again, we'll talk about Borderlands, but one of the characters is they can summon a familiar / ally that goes off and attacks enemies. So, that again, to your point, I think too vague is the problem with this for sure.
Agreed. Now, that's one patent, and I do want to get into the other one, just because it's also kind of ridiculous. It's literally just the mounting of a target. Like, I'm talking World of Warcraft mounts, Final Fantasy XIV mounts. They all match this description. This description is ridiculously long, but to sum it up, it's literally using a game to target a mob or a thing to mount it and then be able to control that mount. Right? That's the summary.
I mean, does that apply to like
legal jargon.
A horse in Witcher?
Yes. Yes, it does. It applies to a horse in Witcher. It applies to, I don't know, GTA 5, where you can summon a car to you and then mount the car, technically. It applies to WoW, obviously. It has thousands of mounts. But one thing, as I was reading through this, is that it specifically is the automatic change to that state. Now, instant cast mounts, not a hard concept. Just because WoW has a 1.5 second cast for their mounts doesn't necessarily mean it's very different. The instant cast does not matter, in my opinion. And on top of that, druids have a shapeshift form that can act as a mount. So I don't know, man. It's just Nintendo doing Nintendo things. And I don't really know. There's so many things that I could say, but I don't want to be overly rude.
Well, and you don't want to bring down the ire of the ninjas hiding in the corner. So.
The ninjas. Oh, jeez.
Well, if we find that non-existent lawyer friend we'll have him on to talk about it. Actually, that being said, a piece of good news for the consumer rather than more of a predatory one. Techland just recently full released Dying Light the Beast for free for owners of Dying Light 2 Stay Human Ultimate Edition, which I do own, and it is available in my library to play. Now, the thing about this is this was originally built as a story DLC for that Ultimate Edition, which guaranteed 2 story DLCs to people that bought it. So technically, those owners were still obligated to a piece of content. However, like we all know with any predatory game company, they could have easily, as they started spending way more time on this, slapped something else together and issued that instead.
That's very true. I mean, the number of times that I've seen just the most ridiculously terrible DLCs ever be released is sad, honestly. Especially when they're like obviously stolen content, not necessarily stolen, but like the company purchased another company, then took all their assets and then just imported it in as a DLC. Yes, I've seen that. It's very sad.
Oh, for sure. Or just, picked some assets, a portion of a map for something else they're worried on, and just shoehorned it in, put a few quest lines on it, and called it a day. I think the point here is that they easily could have phoned it in when they started spending too much time on this instead, and then charged money for this. And to circle back around, there was no announcements for this. I mean, there was a few news stories and that they had taken it out, but it kind of just was like, hey, we're releasing this now. Go have fun. Go download it. There wasn't necessarily a huge lead up, which I do appreciate. And like I said, I appreciate them just giving me a substantial piece of content for free that works and runs and is considered pretty good. I think the reviews on this are fairly decent, which I think we can all appreciate having those types of good things in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, Techland has done well. I've played their games since Dying Light 1. And yeah, I mean, I can't complain about their combat mechanics.
No, they're pretty smooth, that's for sure. Well, I do look forward to playing this when I get some time. I'm pretty sure I've said that about 3 different games so far. So we'll see when that happens. Yeah, we'll see when that happens. Alrighty. We're going to start the conversation here on Borderlands 4, which released and although did have 2.5 million sales in 10 days, that is a substantial shortfall to Borderlands 3, which was 5 million in 5 days. And, Heru, I will point out that Borderlands 3 was timed exclusive for Epic.
That's true. I totally forgot about that, despite the fact that we played Borderlands 3 together.
Yeah, for sure. I think quite a few of us waited until it came out on Steam.
Oh, for sure. The weird part, though, is why, right? Borderlands 3 was amazing. It sold, as you said, 5 million in 5 days. That's 1 million copies a day. And Borderlands 4 didn't even break that in the first week.
Nope.
And I think gamers are just getting more cautious. And I think one of the things that made gamers more cautious was something like Monster Hunter Wilds. Their sales skyrocketed. It nearly doubled the amount of sales that Monster Hunter World had. But in a similar vein, it has the same problems that Borderlands 4 has.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the people that picked up a Monster Hunter game that had never bought a Monster Hunter game before.
Yeah, at my recommendation, no less.
Yeah.
Which I feel bad for.
No. From an outside perspective, I feel like I at least got my money's worth, but it did leave me wanting a bit. And from everything that you've told me about previously in the series, I think if I had partaken in previous games in the series, I would have been definitely more disappointed.
For sure. I mean, I put easily 1,000 hours into base Monster Hunter World, and then another 500 into Iceborne, which was its expansion. I put barely 40 into Wild so far because I'm still waiting for performance increases.
If I remember correctly, we've put in a similar amount of time, which, considering I know how that's like your favorite series, is shocking.
Yeah.
But to your point, I do think that releases like this are making people more wary. And unless you want to say something else about Wilds, I think when you start to see things that are being said from the CEO of Gearbox itself, it also can dampen the desire to pick up the game, which is going to lead us into our next section, Shop Class, where we kind of go into more of the nitty-gritty of the hardware and software in the gaming industry. And we're going to talk about the Randy Pitchford, A.K.A. Duval Magic on X/Twitter, who is the CEO of Gearbox and has no endless amount of controversy throughout the years, as he's put his foot in his mouth many times. And it kind of started on September 6th, and keep in mind the game launched officially on the 12th, where there were concerns from early let's say reviewers or testers who were worried about the performance, kind of similar to what we had in the beta in Monster Hunter Wilds.
That's true. I forgot that they actually mentioned that, something similar like day one patch was going to do a lot, and this is just a beta, don't worry about it type deal. Now, granted, I think a lot of that was because Monster Hunter Wilds, Capcom, in general, had built up a lot of good grace. Their player base for Monster Hunter in general doubled, if not tripled, with Monster Hunter World's release. And then doubled and tripled again with Monster Hunter Wilds. But that also kind of brings me to another topic. How dangerous is that? That's now 10 million plus. Trying to remember the numbers on this one. Yeah, 10 million. I was right.
I mean, you usually are.
10 million in the first month, right? Compared to Monster Hunter World's 7.5 million in the same time period.
Yep.
And the problem is that's 3.5 million people, or 2.5 million people. Wow, math is hard. That Capcom disappointed. Now, the real problem is that Monster Hunter Wilds runs, from what I've been told, perfectly on PlayStation 4 and Xbox. Not 4, 5.
Sure.
But PlayStation and Xbox, current generation, whatever the hell they may be called. And that leads me to believe that either they're just not optimizing for all the graphics cards out there, or they tried to introduce more stuff on the PC version that's just wildly different than what they have on the consoles. So what's the difference?
Well, I definitely think that's true. I also think that there is a shift amongst a lot of prominent people in the industry in terms of what they need to code for and what targets they need to hit, and then combine that with programs like DLSS, which we'll get into. We'll talk more about that in a bit.
For sure.
That they aren't necessarily looking to give gamers the best experience. And as we'll see with Borderlands, they may say the console runs fine, and come to find out, it doesn't actually do that. So let's get into this first tweet that we've kind of been alluding to, where Randy Pitchford put out a tweet that was talking about the day one patch, and specifically, he said, the game runs on all your system, or the game running on all your systems is a miracle. That you can get 55 to 60 frames per second out of a heavy combat is actually incredible given how the engine and what's going on under the hood. He then talks about specifications, hard drives, that type of thing. But I think that's a major concern, because you compare that to the game that came out this year, Avowed, who the art director Matt Hansen also said targeting 30 frames per second is a bare minimum, and being a first-person single-player game, you don't necessarily need that 60 frames, and it allows you to get a lot juicier with VFX and lighting and all this other stuff, end quote. I think that's a concern that they're not just... They're using 30 to 60 frames, especially because that's kind of like the minimum on consoles, as an excuse to not do better.
Yeah, now to be fair, that post was in reply to somebody who supposedly was looking at was playing with a minimum spec machine that didn't actually meet the specifications. So maybe he's kind of right, but at the same time, his later tweets say something different.
That's true, and we'll definitely get into that. I think the other point that I wanted to hit is, I think companies are definitely relying on software, or not software, but features like DLSS, the AI upscaling type of stuff to compensate for the lack of optimization that they're doing. Because a lot of times, especially with Borderlands 4, those numbers that they're giving are with DLSS on. And there is actually a kind of recommended variety of spec that exists out there where every target states that it has DLSS on.
Yeah.
Which I just think is a problem.
I 100% agree. DLSS, and we can get into this more in a bit if you want me to skip it, but they have a minimum expectation for input frames.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So,
but
these game developers, they're not actually building their games in a way that this software actually wants them to use it.
Oh, 100%. And I think even though DLSS looks good, DLSS doesn't look as good as native. And considering we just heard the Avowed director say that it allows them to get a lot juicier with VFX and lighting, and along those lines, I'm going to assume, just textures and high resolution and stuff, which then why are we focusing on DLSS? If I'm supposed to have a super high fidelity, consistent 60 FPS experience, I don't consider DLSS to be that high quality experience.
I agree. The artifacting from DLSS and the upscaling involved, it's just not a good time. I understand their desire to make these big flashy mechanics and these incredible bosses and stuff like that, but do it in an optimized manner. Do it in such a way that I'm actually going to enjoy the experience, because as of right now, I don't.
No, it's kind of disappointing. And when Randy Pitchford's reply is to code your own engine and show us how it's done, please, end quote, I'm not sure that that's what people want to be told, right? I think the ability is to have something that meets a baseline, and if DLSS is in the game and people want a nicer FPS experience, then that's something that should be optional to turn on, which we have developers actually saying now, right? I mentioned the upcoming Battlefield 6 earlier, who the technical director, Christian Bull, B-U-H-L, said to PC Gamer, we want Battlefield 6 to run great without DLSS, and we want to give you the option to use it if you want. I believe all our default performance targets are not with upscaling on, and the recommended for that game is a 3060 Ti to hit 60 FPS at 1440p without DLSS.
I'd really love to know how many gamers are still playing on 1080.
Oh, quite a few. I mean, the Steam numbers exist, right?
That's true.
So I do think it's still the majority of the gamers, but 1440p is catching up.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, personally, I play on 1440p for everything that I play on, but and honestly, downscaling to 1080 is kind of cringe for me.
So I found the numbers. So 57% of Steam gamers are on 1080p, with 20% on 1440p and 3.5% on.
That's still a pretty big number for 1440. So the fact that they're targeting 60 FPS with native on a 5-year-old card for 1440p, that's impressive. That's what every development studio should be targeting.
Well, and not just a 5-year-old card, right? You have 3050, 3060, and then the Ti edition. So you're 3 steps up from the entry level.
Yeah. So then imagine just, using a 3060, which I think right now you can probably get for $50. Don't quote me on that. But you could easily run that thing at 1080p at probably 60 or more frames.
Oh, for sure. And, we're also talking about a multiplayer game where, the laggy type of things matter. You're talking about a major battlefield with lots of things going on, all kinds of different vehicles, and, it's not a hit scan game, right? Bullets have travel, so all those things are being calculated, and you're still talking about hitting those performance targets. So I just don't understand the excuse that Randy Pitchford is giving. Because if you were talking about hitting 60 FPS natively with higher end settings at 1440p, I could be okay with that, and then DLSS gives you a bump above that. But I just can't really agree with the look that they have right now.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree. And I mean, we talked about the most common hardware, or in the case of what we just talked about, what we're all currently playing on 1080p versus 1440. One of the things that Randy mentions is that the most common hardware is a 4-year-old cell phone. I don't think that's accurate for anyone who's playing on Steam.
Definitely not.
And I think it's disingenuous to talk about the most common hardware being a 4-year-old cell phone when you're not releasing a mobile game. If we were releasing a mobile game, then yeah, we'd probably have the same comments. You should probably be designing for people who have 4-year-old cell phones and not people who have a Google Pixel 10 Pro Fold.
Yeah, right?
Right? Just as a freaking example of a phone that just came out. You shouldn't be designing a game that can only run on that thing. That's just stupid.
Yeah, but Heru, you forget, Randy Pitchford, quote, is saying that it's a premium game made for premium gamers, end quote. So, all those pores can, just go play something else.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The PlayStation 5 is absolutely considered a premium system, despite the fact that mine and my partner's computer, each one is at least 4 times the price of a PlayStation 5. But it seems to run okay on that.
Yep.
I mean, kind of.
Well, 100%. Because, he goes on to talk about how Borderlands 4 can't run on a PlayStation 4, and you can't expect it to run on too old of PC hardware. And you and I are talking about PCs that may have some newer parts in them, but were pretty much, built over the last 5 years. And to his own discussion where he's talking about it's not made for the PlayStation 4, i.e., even though he doesn't specify made for the PlayStation 5, the PlayStation 5 is already 5 years old. And if you look at the specs and the performance it gives, it's comparable to a high-end 20 series card. And the 20 series NVIDIA cards came out in 2018. That's 7-year-old hardware performance that the PlayStation 5 has. So I don't know where the excuse is.
What's really sad about that is that my 4-year-old cell phone could probably match a PlayStation 5 nowadays.
So definitely some of them.
But that being the case, right? I haven't played Borderlands 4, but I almost guarantee that if I played it, I'd have similar issues. And I have a top-of-the-line, newest generation AMD card.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that doesn't compare to a 5090, right? But it's certainly significantly better than a high-end 20 series.
Yep. Well,
I don't know.
And the thing here is, to your point, even with your high-end hardware, which Randy Pitchford says every PC gamer must accept the reality of the relationship between their hardware and the software they're running and what it's doing. I paraphrased at the end there. I mean, Digital Foundry, which if you don't check them out, is a fantastic YouTube channel that delves in deep dives into the technical performance of games on hardware. So I highly recommend their YouTube channel. They're a great group. But they did a breakdown after the launch of the game where they used the high-end cards, and while it mitigated a lot of the issues, it didn't remove them.
Yeah, that's not really surprising to me, especially given this list of tweets that I'm staring at. Like, to kick it back at Randy, right? If every PC gamer must accept the reality of their relationship between their hardware and what the software they are running is doing, then every development company, software, game development, who cares, needs to understand the relationship between the consumer and the shit product you put out.
Yep. I think that's a great point. But I mean, here's the thing. We can't change what he's doing. We can only go off of what he's saying. And I think the fact that he's literally telling people to get refunds on Steam if you aren't happy with it isn't a great look. That's not a consumer-facing thing. That's I'm not going to change. I don't care. I guess just get your money back and leave me be type of statement.
Yeah.
So
that's just ridiculous. Like, if I'm that unhappy, I've already refunded your game, bro. I'm just telling you it's bad.
100%. And we already talked about how sales are down. So why would people return for the next game? Or if they hear Randy Pitchford is involved in a new, gaming IP, wouldn't that kind of put on the, like, oh, well, I've heard about that guy. Maybe I don't want to get into that new series.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's the trust that you build, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why Capcom's arguably terrible release of Monster Hunter Wilds sold 10 million copies in a month. Like, they built that trust. Now, granted, they shattered it by trying to release on Steam with console at the same time. This was their first release, simultaneous release of console and PC at the same time. Their previous iterations were all 1 year out. And it's obvious to me, as someone who played World and Iceborne on both PlayStation 4 and Steam on a good computer, that they clearly needed that additional optimization time.
Oh, for sure.
And it makes you wonder how many other games that are releasing same time on Steam as consoles need that additional buffer time, effectively. PC's not easy. I'm never going to claim that building a game on PC or even consoles is easy, but PC is even worse than consoles because consoles have a set amount of RAM, they have a set amount of actual processing power, graphical power, all these things. They are set in stone. Outside of the fact that they released 3 different versions of a console, they might as well be graphics cards at this point. But PC is different. We have the options for probably 40 plus different graphics cards out there, not to mention the amount of CPUs that we have available to us, the different types of RAM, all kinds of stuff. It's clearly difficult, but that's the industry you got into. Do it.
I think you're 100% correct. And I think the fact that on both Monster Hunter Wilds and Borderlands 4, where you can be on a last generation card, which should be easily something that a game can perform on. There's no reason that you need to have an immediate current generation card. So a 4070, a mid-range last generation card should easily be able to hold up. No bottlenecks on the CPU. You're running an i7. it is only an 11700, but you're still talking a nice enough CPU where that's not your bottleneck. On medium settings and with DLSS on, you still only get 53 frames at 1440p. I just think that's unacceptable level of performance.
That's just insane. Like, simply put, the 4070 card is not bad.
No.
And while Intel has its problems, for sure, the i7-11700 is not a terrible CPU. And we're talking medium settings here. How is that game built where at 1440p, you can't even get 60 FPS native, let alone with DLSS?
I mean, I have no idea. I think with a $600 card, there's no reason that I should have to have DLSS on medium settings and not even reach 60 frames.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree. It does make me wonder, are they using, like, LOD, for example, or did they just skip that part?
I mean, I haven't been able to get into the settings of myself, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. But yeah, I mean, that could be the type of issue, some part of the issue for sure. But unfortunate that and the thing that kills me about this whole thing is that he is dead set and convinced that this is absolutely acceptable. There's no remorse. There's no consideration. I mean, if he had put out a tweet that was like, hey, we've worked on this game for a long time. We feel this is acceptable to launch in because we need to get this game out. And, we're going to continue to work on this game. I mean, people obviously wouldn't be happy with the statement, but it would at least be a realistic one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Now, the Monster Hunter community is impressive, to say the least. And they put together a massive spreadsheet. And this isn't on 1440. Wonder if I could find something similar, though. I'm scrolling through this freaking gigantic spreadsheet of everybody's performance.
Well, while you're looking at that, I will just point out that we mentioned a 4070 medium settings and with DLSS getting 53 frames. And Randy Pitchford is quoted as saying, "It is a mistake to believe or expect that PCs between minimum specifications and recommended specification can achieve all of extremely high frame rate, maximum ultra features, and extremely high resolution." Bro, we ain't even talking about that. We're at a 4070 on medium settings. You're not even getting close to that statement.
Yeah.
So, just ridiculous.
Here. I managed to find something similar. This guy is running on a 1440. He's running at 1440p. He's running off of a 4070. And he's running an i7-12700K with 32 gigabytes of RAM. He is running DLSS. He has ray tracing turned off, and he has his graphics set to ultra. Okay? And this is, like, I consider Monster Hunter Wilds terrible in terms of performance, but it still does better than Borderlands 4 because this guy got 61.5 frames per second.
Yeah.
It's not better by much, and that is with frame generation turned off, by the way.
That's fair. I mean, especially with DLSS off. Because the specific example we used had DLSS on, you're still only getting 53. I feel it's sad that I have to say, wow, that's a lot better.
Right? It is. It is honestly very sad. And if I filter out all this crap, I really wonder what's the highest anybody has gotten with a 1440p screen resolution. And if this actually sorts properly.
And, keep in mind that's 20% of the Steam market, 1440p.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's sad that because obviously with it being up to 20%, that should, I feel like personally, be the standard that you target for recommended settings. I mean, we talked about how that is what Battlefield 6 is targeting for recommended settings. So I don't feel like at this current point in time, even though it's still the majority, that 1080p is the acceptable recommended resolution. I feel like we need to move on from that, and it needs to be 1440p.
I thoroughly agree. Looking at this, 9800X 3D with a RTX 5080 and 32 gigabytes of RAM. With ultra settings, high ray tracing, DLSS, and frame generation enabled, 174 frames per second is the lowest. Nope, sorry, that was not the lowest. Is one of the highest, since it doesn't like to sort properly because numbers are hard for Google Sheets.
That's fair.
But I do see stuff in the 200 range, right?
Yeah. For
the absolute highest. But for someone similar that's actually, not trying to break the bank just to play this game, 7700X on a 7800 XT Radeon card, 32 gigabytes, playing on medium, set ray tracing to low with FSR turned on, and frame generation enabled, 30 FPS.
No, I mean, it's just unacceptable. I mean, between the two games, it is a disappointment, and I think in general they just need to do better.
I mean, I agree. The 7800 XT is one generation back.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the 4070.
Yeah.
But, I mean, of course, that doesn't matter to Randy, who talks about how he's playing on a 5080. Like, oh, you're shocked that you're getting a decent experience on a card that is the most recent release and is the minus the TI moniker, the second highest tier available? That's your benchmark?
It's for real.
I was like, dude, you're a CEO of a company. That's not what people can afford on the vast majority of them. It's just a disconnect. And then he goes on to mention, I'm literally watching my wife play PS5 right now, and it's awesome. Which, as we talked about earlier, turns out that also had problems. Going back to Digital Foundry, who found out that there was actually a memory leak, and over the course of an hour, from 30 to 60 minutes, the performance would actually drop pretty heavily, and the only way to fix it was to reboot the game.
That's insane. It's a lot easier to reboot games on consoles nowadays than it used to be back in the Xbox 360 days. But still, having to reboot my game every hour, what am I playing? An alpha version of a World of Warcraft patch?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
I mean, combine this with all the other stuff that we've talked about, and you're showing that you haven't even done enough testing on, let's just exclude Xbox, PS5, PS Pro. That's two models, and it's consistently repeatable that Digital Foundry was able to discover, and no one found this out? Did you have anyone test this? Was anyone looking for any sort of performance dips, even on console?
I mean, unfortunately, one of the first things to go at most struggling game development studios is QA.
I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, and you're not wrong, and those people aren't necessarily paid well, and they're definitely worked.
For sure. Oh, absolutely. As someone who looked into it to try and get into the games industry in general, yeah, that you start at like minimum wage. Good luck. Enjoy playing video games for a living. Not that you can make a living off of that.
I mean, you're not wrong, especially depending on where you live, but that's a whole different discussion.
So on consoles, after 60 minutes, your performance just tanks. But on PC, They want you to play for 15 minutes before you actually judge the FPS?
Yeah. So they released an update to fix that memory leak thing. And on top of that, on all versions, Gearbox recommended for those who were having stuttering issues to wait 15 minutes for shaders to compile.
What?
I mean, we have this mountain of evidence of either ignorance or malicious incompetence, and even after they're putting out updates, it's continuing. And the horrible thing about this is back on September 15th, Andy Edzer of PC Mag found out that if he increased his shader his cache size on the NVIDIA control panel to 100 gigs, it fixed problems, but I think we can all easily recognize that having a shader cache size of 100 gigs is insane.
Now, granted, that's just the max, right? It's just saying, hey, NVIDIA, you can use up to 100 gigabytes. That's still ridiculous, don't get me wrong. But the actual ridiculous part is the fact that after using that workaround, it consumed 16.8 gigabytes of his disk space. What the hell is that? I've downloaded full-blown indie games that are significantly less than that I guarantee I'll put more time into than I ever did Borderlands 3 or 4.
Yep. The Battlefield 6
Especially
beta was like 46 gigs, so that's what, a third?
Yeah. Game size, I think it's very obvious to me that we are in this, I'm going to call it an epidemic of developers refusing to optimize their game. And I think this started probably around the 30 series age. Because
100%.
Graphics cards and CPUs got to the point that they could just power through all of these unoptimized games.
Well,
but the problem is... Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, to your point, DLSS introduced during the 20 series, right? And I think
I'll take your word for it.
I'm fairly certain introduced because I if I remember correctly, DLSS 2.0 came out for the 30 series. So I think, as you were kind of getting at, it initially came out on that generation, and then it took obviously a couple of years for developers to start utilizing it fully. And I think as they started to utilize it, to your point, in that 30 series generation of cards where it's even better on the 2.0, they started to, I don't want to say get lazy, but rely too much on it.
Absolutely, they've started relying on it too much. Like, shader cache, right? Why is this an issue? Why do we have just shaders? We're not even talking textures. We're not talking anything else. We're talking shaders. Why has shader cache become such an issue lately? Because Monster Hunter Wilds still has the same problem. I launched Monster Hunter Wilds recently just to see how long it took to optimize shaders. It took me 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I'm like,
exactly what Borderlands was recommending.
Yeah, exactly. But the difference is that Monster Hunter Wilds just forces you to stare at a loading bar for 15 minutes instead.
About that.
Yeah, exactly. So what are they doing? What are they doing with these shaders that is causing this amount of processing time to be able to actually implement?
I mean, I think it stems from the type of thing where you're talking about ray tracing needs, right? It's wanting to push the fidelity, which also, let's be honest, in Borderlands 4 being a cell shaded game, although it can look good, not quite necessary. But you're talking about pushing the fidelity, right? Because shaders are basically supposed to handle things like lighting, shadows, and textures. And make it and provide better performance as they're kind of like for oversimplification, like loaded up ahead of time, right? But I think one of the issues that you're seeing is this focus on those types of features rather than making sure the game performs well and then making it look better. And I know in game development all of that happens simultaneously, but I think the point is making sure that the game runs correctly before you go above and beyond for other feature set type stuff.
I thoroughly agree. I mean, I feel like a game should run, at the very least, on the most common hardware at 60 FPS at 1080p. And while that is probably true for Monster Hunter Wilds, that's not what they recommend. In fact, the recommended system requirements expects people to be able to play at 30 FPS and then frame gen up from there.
No.
Which is wild because both AMD and NVIDIA recommend a minimum FPS input of about 60 frames before trying to generate more frames, or as we like to dub it, fake frames, with frame generation.
Those faux frames?
Yeah, faux frames. That gives them too much credit. Fuzz amazing.
It is delicious, but as is with pho, a lot of that is just loose soup. No shade on pho. I love pho. I love pho. No shade. But I think the point is, as we've already mentioned, the minimum should not be 1080p. The minimum should be 1440p. And 30 FPS, we've long passed that, especially on the PC industry or the PC side. And most of the current generation consoles, and I guarantee you the next generation of consoles, the advertising is gonna be 60 FPS. Like our console base, like 60 FPS for a lot of first party launch titles, because that's the advertising thing that they always get into. We are moving past 30 FPS and 1080p, and I think companies are failing to catch up to kind of where industry adoption of hardware is going, and they're focusing too much on DLSS to make up that ground.
Is Monster Hunter Wilds a Crysis 3 scenario? I'm looking at the recommended specs because I was curious because I couldn't remember whether or not they expected it to run at 60 FPS at 1440p. They don't. The notes state this game is expected to run at 1080p, 60 FPS, with frame generation enabled under medium graphics. For these specs, an i5-10400, an i3-12100, an AMD Ryzen 5 3600, and a RTX 2060 or Radeon RX 6600 with 16 gigabytes of RAM. You're telling me with those specifications, I still can't hit 60 FPS at 1080p with medium graphics without frame generation? That is a ridiculous reliance on frame generation.
Oh, 100%. And I think you're touching on the subject that I do want to move into. Before we do that, though, I just want to sum up. I think Randy Pitchford is a little kind of out of touch when you're talking about normal gamers. And I think all this bluster that he's had on social media has definitely adversely affected the company and his game. And I would hope in the future, because I am a fan of the Borderlands series, I would hope in the future that this bit of, let's say, ego kind of goes to the wayside, but that has not been his history, so I do not expect it. So when Borderlands 4 goes heavily on sale and is finally patched, as is every game that has problems, eventually I'll pick it up and play it. But to your point,
I agree.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you and I will have to play it, and then we can talk about it here. Anyways, I think that reliance on DLSS is to cover up something that consistently happens in the gaming industry every time there's a new feature set or the on-the-box feature that people love to advertise. So stay with me for a second.
Okay.
Battlefield 5 came out 7 years ago. And if you look up kind of any photos or anything of that game, or even just load it up, it looks amazing. For a 7-year-old game, easily could come out today and people would still say, looks great. But as with other things that we've already talked about today, it had a rocky launch. It was during the 20 series of cards. It was utilizing ray tracing. And because of that, it had all kinds of issues at launch. And so I think when these games try to get this high-end fidelity, it doesn't matter 7 years from now, right? No one's remembering Battlefield 5 for how it looks. I had to go back and look that up. People are remembering it for the rocky launch and the issues it has. What are people going to remember Monster Hunter Wilds for?
The exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The rocky launch and the terrible performance issues. And, in fact, the Monster Hunter community has generated a lot of art for that blocky monster issue. That, I think, is what people will remember Monster Hunter Wilds for, is the blocky monsters.
I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of sad that I never got that. I mean, I think I got it once, but not as badly as you had it. So yeah. I'm kind of sad I missed out on that. But I think the point being is, and it always reminds me of a quote, and, you know, I'll try to look it up, but it was always, you know, a good game that's delayed is only delayed until it comes out, and a bad game that comes out is bad forever. Right? Because that first impression means so much. And there's very few games, and I'm sure we'll talk about it over the course of this podcast, but games like Rainbow Six Siege and No Man's Sky who do turn it around, but for every one of those, there's always 5 that are terrible that you remember for being terrible. And I think for a lot of times for this type of stuff, it's because they're focusing on those features. We mentioned Battlefield 5 looks so good because of the early adoption of ray tracing. But it's not something it needed to be good. And you see a history of this over gaming. And stop me if you want to talk about anything in particular, but you're talking about NVIDIA Hairworks in the early 2010s, which I remember was always on the box, especially for narrative RPGs type of stuff, where they're like, look how realistic their hair looks. And it was rendering that type of stuff, and it was causing performance impacts. You're talking about full screen super sampling, anti-aliasing. You're talking about early stuff with the PhysX and Havoc engines. You're talking about ambient occlusion and high quality dynamic shadows in the early 2000s. Tessellation in the early days of DX11, which could have up to a 30% impact on gaming, and even before tessellation, but in the same vein, geometry shaders introduced in DirectX 10. And I think this type of stuff where it is good technology, I named off a bunch of stuff that is in the background of games today that we don't notice, but were issues when they first came out for being performance impacting stuff.
For sure. Now, I don't know if they can ever really get frame generation to match what all of these things currently do and what we expect from these things. But right now, frame generation creates so many fake artifacts on the screen. It's terrible.
Oh, and for sure.
I don't think we need games that look like I'm staring out my window. Right?
No.
I mean, I play WoW way too many hours a week. And the other games that I've found the most enjoyment out of most recently have been things like Haste, Megabonk, RuneScape, old school RuneScape no less, RimWorld, literally an 8-bit game. If there are any games out there that prove graphics are not the be-all, end-all, it's games like those. RimWorld is one of the few games that has an overwhelmingly positive review on Steam. Old school RuneScape has a larger player base than RuneScape 3, which is its modern game.
Yep.
And on top of that, World of Warcraft is a 20-year-old game, and it is incredibly stylized, and nothing about it looks realistic. If I wanted realism, I'd go touch grass.
For sure. 100%. I mean, exactly to your point and kind of what we touched on earlier, Cyberpunk 2077 looks fucking amazing, right? To this day. But people don't remember it for that. And
no, absolutely not.
When you turn on DLSS, there's all kinds of hologram effects and stuff when you're driving around town that look terrible in that game with DLSS on. But you almost have to use DLSS, especially when you're using ray tracing. And I think that's the point, is ray tracing looks amazing, but I think you have to implement it correctly and be careful when you do it, because it needs to be put in to a point where it's not negatively impacting the performance of a game. And if that isn't today, then maybe that'll be tomorrow or next year. It just as all the technologies we named off, I'm sure it'll eventually be a mainstay staple that is just running in the background, handling the lighting in the future. But that's not today. When we have games that have that 8-bit look that are fun, just as you mentioned, it's the gameplay we remember. And there are some games that we'll remember for looking good, but that's not the vast majority of them.
I can name a few games that I want to look as absolutely good as possible, and I don't care about the frame rate. Maybe I can only name one. Detroit Become Human.
Sure.
It's a perfect game to put in as much fidelity as you possibly can. Borderlands, that ain't it. Monster Hunter, that ain't it. Those games, they are fast-paced, and I expect perfect input lag. Yep. I want to be able to iframe a monster swinging its tail at me. I want to watch every frickin' bullet go into that dude's face. That's what I want to see. I don't care about the cracks on the brick wall 50 feet away from my character. I just don't. No. And I don't care how good that shadow looks or how good that beam looks from the sun.
No, even Randy mentioned that, you know, we're lucky to get those high frames because of everything that's happening on screen. To your point, when all that's going on, what can you really focus on? It's not a single player game. I know that's how it's billed, but anyone who plays that, will most likely play it in co-op, and crazy stuff is happening. You're not seeing the majority of that high fidelity stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think that we as a gaming audience have been crying out for more stylized video games.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And that it's just unfortunate that that's where we're at. But I think we've definitely run our course on this one. I think we've gone through and mentioned all the things we wanted. We hope that we can get some more streamlined performance out of our games, especially the AAA games in the future. And I'm looking forward to continuing this podcast in the future. All right, people, close your books and pack those bags. That's all we have for this week. We hope you enjoy your time off and look forward to your company in the next course. Peace.
Later.